Hi there at the other side of the display. I'm very happy you signed in for this webinar where we will deal with some of the basics of GDPR, entitled GDPR for Dummies. My name is Hans Demeyer, and as supplier of inspiration, it's my pleasure to walk through some ideas together with you. Have you read the article of that Belgian company who was judged or convicted to pay a 70,000 euro fine? Well, I have. Actually, the reason they had to pay the fine was because personal data leaked out of their company and got into the wrong hands. And one of the victims, a European citizen, filed a complaint. And in the end, they had to pay a fine. Now, I asked you whether you have read the article. Well, probably you haven't, because the article has not yet been published. But as of May 25th, 2018, we are very likely to read that kind of stories in the newspapers. Because that's the very moment when the grace period with regard to GDPR, and GDPR stands for the General Data Protection Regulation, comes to an end. Currently, we are in a 2 years grace period in which companies can prepare to be fully compliant with GDPR. And what I would like to do with you today is run over the basic concepts of GDPR, give you some ideas of how you can start stories on that topic with your customers and inspire customers to want to know more, and then finally help you to discover business opportunities that are in there for you that you can base on the GDPR story. So I hope you're ready for that, because GDPR really is a gift from heaven for you to generate new business and to have interesting stories with your customer. So let's start with what is GDPR. And I'm not going to take you into the 99 articles of GDPR. We have to keep things simple. Secondly, I'm going to give you some questions you can share with your customer to make them aware of what am I doing in that field? How do I treat my customer data? How do I treat my employee data? Etc., etc. And then finally, what's in it for you? There will be an additional webinar where we will deep dive into the opportunities, but I would already like to share some inspiration with you on solutions that Tech Data and Microsoft provide you with in order to generate interesting and profitable recurring business models. So let's first have a look at GDPR. Is GDPR new? No, it isn't. It's actually the next step into a series of regulations and laws that already exist. But there are a few new things that are really important to know. One of the most striking ones is that every organization who deals with personal data of European citizens should be accountable for how the data is stored, how the data is accessed. They should be able to modify the data when a data subject asks for that, and they should be able to delete data when the requirement is put forward. Another major change is that personal data is no longer just a name and an address. It is also an IP reference, for instance, and other technical profiling data, etc., that can lead to the identification of a person. So it's very important that if you are a data controller, that your organization is ready for these requirements. If you're a data processor, the same goes. I mean, you have to be compliant. Microsoft in this context is a data processor. If you store your customer data in the Microsoft Office 365 environment, you are the controller, Microsoft is the processor, and you would want a processor to be fully compliant. Now, the good news is you can share with your customers that Microsoft will be fully compliant by May 25th, 2018. The data subject, well, that's any European citizen. So if I have a company that is located in Japan or in the United States, but I deal with data of European citizens, then I have to be GDPR compliant. And that's also good news, certainly with regard to cloud computing and to data centers that are outside of the Belgian region. Now, other things that are interesting to know is that GDPR will kind of force companies to choose for solutions where privacy is included by design. So it might be a good reason for you to kind of orient your customers towards fully compliant solutions without having to add bits and pieces from different vendors and different origins. Make it a smooth, basic process that is as compliant as possible. And that's the most important things to remember about the GDPR. Now, obviously, Tech Data and Microsoft organize deep dive sessions, so if you want to know more about the content of GDPR and what's exactly in the 99 articles, stay tuned for the agendas. The next big thing is, With what I know now about GDPR, how can I make my customers aware, and what are the questions that I can ask them? Consider it like a sort of an exploration. This is the customer data, it's the treasure, it's the employee data, it's all the personal and sensitive pieces of information that we have. And what we want to know is how far do they travel inside and outside our company? Who has access to them? What kind of information do we manage? Do we have the consent of the data subject to use the data? Do we know the purpose, and are we clear on the purpose? Let me give you an example. I recently was on a website where I had to fill in my name, my address, and a lot of personal data just to receive a newsletter. Well, that's no longer allowed, you know. And that's one thing. But also when I have data, where is it stored? What kind of data do I have? Chances are that 9 out of 10 of your customers will really start being very alert and awake for that kind of topic, because they all treat data, whether it's employee data or customer data. So you do have a story. Another thing is, if you have that data, how do you share it? You know, the GDPR does not only bear on human processing. It's not only me passing information to you, it is also the automated way of processing. So let's simply take the example of me having an address in my Outlook that synchronizes with my mobile device. Well, that's a kind of a processing, that's a data transfer. Is my mobile device protected? That's a good question. What happens when it gets stolen? What happens if someone asks me to delete their names and email addresses from a distribution list? Is it going to be erased on all of these devices or just on one single device? Now, we all want to avoid the high fines that can run up to 4% of your global turnover. Very dramatic situation if it happens. So we should be very aware for that. You should also know or challenge your customer as to where they are in the global context of GDPR. And I can assure you that just by asking a few of these questions, your customer will be increasingly interested in wanting to know more. Because obviously they will realize that they have to be very clear in why they collect data. They will have to have the consent. They will have to be very transparent on where the data is stored. They will have to be able to provide logs and reports of how the data is processed and stored. They will be able to delete data when someone asks for it, or to modify, even if it were just like a language mark or whatever. It should be done within 48 hours. So it's obvious that you cannot kind of sit back and just wait. We still have 1 year to do it, so now's the moment to pick up the phone, dial the number of prospects and customers, and challenge them with these questions. And why would you do that? Well, not because you assume that it's your social responsibility. No, you would do that because you want to make money out of it. And that's very interesting. Now, the first step that I would advise you to do is to kind of sit together with your customer and make the inventory. Meaning that you would run over what data they have, where it is stored, whether it's GDPR related or not, how the transfer is, who accesses the data, etc. So you just make a list. Could be a simple Excel sheet, or maybe just a sheet of paper with some columns and some rows, and you just fill it out together with the customer. Of course, charge a fee for that, right? Half a day or a 1-day consultancy fee. I can assure you customers will be more than ready to pay for that. After that, you can use the information you have collected to start providing solutions. It all starts with the device your customer is using. Make sure it's a modern device, preferably a Windows 10 device, where you can activate a lot of security features that will protect the information that is on the device. Next, if they're not yet on Office 365, strongly advise the step towards Office 365. In a subsequent webinar, I will give you the details of and good motivations of why it is so, but just the idea of having everything in a central location, highly secured, is already more than enough to an argument to make the step. And from that point onwards, you can expand to Azure. Honestly speaking, the choice between a local server that is highly vulnerable when it comes to external intrusions and maybe identity theft, etc., or a well-secured data center that is GDPR compliant, The choice is rapidly made if you ask me. I would go for the data center and get rid of all the worries and the possible risks. And then, of course, last but not least, there's all your mobile devices. Remember, I told you a few minutes ago that when we talk GDPR, we also talk data transfer in automated ways, like synchronizing between devices. So how do you protect these devices? Is your mobile phone protected, dear customer? Of course, I'm already thinking about enterprise mobility and other services. Even for small companies, this becomes very relevant at this moment. Anyway, together with the logs that you can generate from Office 365 and Azure, stuff that I will deep dive in the next webinar, you already sense that there's an immense ocean of opportunities in there. So this brings us to the end of this webinar, which is the first in a series in which we'll discover plenty of opportunities. What I would like you to take away now is, first of all, that GDPR matters to all of your customers. Secondly, that you can share some very interesting stories with any type of people that is working in these companies, but keep it simple, keep it basic. And third of all, there is a lot of business opportunities for you together with Tech Data and Microsoft. And as I said, these opportunities, we will dig into them in the next session. So I strongly invite you to sign in again and follow the GDPR as a business booster for you and your company. Take care. Bye.